Have you ever wondered why some ex-Muslims are burning the Quran in public? What could possibly drive them to such an extreme act of defiance and disrespect? Is it just a sign of hatred and anger, or is there something more behind it? In a series of videos, we are going to explore some of the possible reasons why some ex-Muslims are burning the Quran these days. We will look at some of the verses in the Quran that they find problematic or unacceptable, and try to understand their perspective and their arguments. We will also examine some of the responses and refutations from Muslim scholars and apologists and see if they can provide satisfactory answers or solutions. The 34th verse in Surah An-Nisa, literally meaning the chapter of the women, advises men to beat up their wives if they keep disobeying them. Moreover, it states that Allah has given privilege to men over women. Men are the guardians of women because Allah has given privilege to some over others, and because they spend out of their wealth. The good women are therefore obedient, guarding the unseen as Allah has guarded. And for those whose disobedience you fear, admonish them, and quit sleeping with them, and beat them. Then if they obey you, do not seek a way against them. Surely Allah is sublime and great. One of the problematic words here is faddala. Faddala is the third person singular form of the gerund or master tafdil, meaning preference, or in this context, giving preference to some over others. The other is wadrabuhunna, which means beat them. Some ex-Muslims find this verse unacceptable and oppressive, as it implies that men have authority and superiority over women, and that they can use physical violence to discipline them. They also question why Allah would allow such a practice in the first place, and why He would not provide a more peaceful and respectful way of resolving marital conflicts. Some Muslims try to explain this verse by saying that this verse is simply reflecting the social norms of the time when it was revealed. But in contrast, most Muslim clerics strongly believe that whatever is in Quran is an all-time solution to all human matters and must be carried out accordingly. Regarding the word meaning beat them, some say that it's not meant to be taken literally and or applied indiscriminately, but rather as a last resort and with certain conditions and limitations. I do agree from the tune of the verse that Quran considers the beating as the last resort, and that violence is the last resort anyhow in many cases of conflicts. But is it really the last resort against a disobeying woman who has not yet shown a sign of violence? I'm not so sure. I'll let you guys to be the judge of that. They also argue that the word adribuhunna does not necessarily mean beat them or strike them, but rather separate from them or tap them lightly. They also point out that this verse is not meant to justify or encourage domestic violence, but rather to prevent divorce and maintain harmony in the family. To see if there is a nicer meaning for the verb daraba, which is the simple singular form of the same verb, I went to the online dictionary of Al-Ma'ani and searched the word, and there was no nice meaning to extract from the word daraba. Then I searched the word in bab.la, and I found out that it can also mean to flick, which is more subtle type of hitting. Then searched flick reversely and found the Arabic word haraka. From the English meanings, we see that this verb could be a better option to be used in this verse. But still, as most Muslim clerics say, God would know much better than all of us as to what word to use here, so it doesn't create confusion and exploitation. There is a verse in Quran that was semantically repeated 4 times with the same meaning, stating that the text of Quran was composed in a simple way so everyone can simply get admonishment from them. Certainly, we have made the Quran simple for the sake of admonishment. So is there anyone who will be admonished? But let's get back and take a better look at the verse. Men are the guardians of women because Allah has given privilege to some over others, and because the men spend out of their wealth. According to the social norms of the time when Quran was revealed to Muhammad, the Quran is stating that men are the guardians of women because men are providing for women. But as we all know, that's not necessarily the case at the time being, as men are not the single source of income for modern families anymore. Therefore, I believe if we take one of the Quran's reasons for making men the superior ones in the family as also a necessary condition for the whole verdicts of the verse, and also approach the deductions of this verse through a simple logic, then we can simply conclude that the statement of this verse is just not simply applicable to today's world. Therefore, as it's not only the men who spend out of their wealth for their family anymore, but it's also the women, men don't have any superiority over women anymore, and subsequently, they are not authorized to beat them or discipline them as well. Moreover, we can think of God granting the superiority to men as only making them more fortunate in the field of muscular strength. And they are the ones who have to get out and do the hard physical work. But this statement is also not quite the case in the modern world, as most works don't involve much physical strength anymore, and we see women who even join armies nowadays. Now let's move on to the second issue that some ex-Muslims and other critics have with the Quran. The 38th verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah prescribes a harsh and irreversible punishment for thieves. This verse is often seen as a violation of human rights and dignity, as well as a contradiction to the Quran's own message of mercy and forgiveness. Here's the verse in Arabic and English. As for male and female thieves, cut off their hands for what they have done, a deterrent from Allah, and Allah is Almighty and All-Wise. Some Muslims try to justify this punishment as a deterrent measure that prevents crime and maintains social order. They also argue that this punishment is only applied under strict conditions and with due process, and that it has never been actually performed in any Islamic country. However, critics believe these arguments are not very convincing for several reasons. First, there is no clear evidence that cutting off the hands of thieves actually deters crime or reduces theft. In fact, some studies have shown that harsh punishments do not have a significant effect on the crime rates, and may even increase them by creating resentment and desperation among the offenders. Second, there is no justification or benefit for imposing such a punishment in the first place, as it violates the dignity and rights of the offenders and deprives them of their chance to rehabilitate, improve, or repent. It also contradicts the Quran's own teachings of mercy and forgiveness, which encourage Muslims to pardon and overlook the faults of others and to seek Allah's pardon and forgiveness for themselves. Finally, the previous verses and later verses or any other verses in Quran does not impose any condition or restriction to this verdict. So by just simply taking this verse word by word, an Islamic ruler or judge can order to cut the hands of a thief. Despite all this, if we consider the historical context of this verse, we may be able to understand the harshness of this punishment to some extent. An era when the practice of armed robbery was so common among Arabs. This barbaric way of living was still in existence even after Muslims achieved to establish a central governance over the Arabian Peninsula. Therefore, we can perhaps consider this kind of harsh verdict as a necessary deterrent to prevent these too many robberies, which could end up with all sorts of damages and injuries for others, and not as a sentence for someone who just stole an apple from a supermarket. However, it is important to note that neither of the verses before or after this verse, nor anywhere else in the Quran, provide much detail about the conditions of the theft that could be punished with imputation. Likewise, the word as-sariq is a very wide general term that can be applied to all sorts of thieves. In Surah Al-Qalam, starting from the 10th verse, Quran apparently orders Muhammad to not obey a specific person who was regarded as a hypocrite, and then goes on with describing the characters of this person. And in the 13th verse, Quran calls this person a bastard or a baseborn. And do not obey any vile swearer, scandalmonger, talebearer, hinderer of all good, sinful transgressor, callous, and on top of that, baseborn. The word zani, based on many existing online Islamic sources, whether Shiite or Sunni, means waladuz zina or bastard. And even if it means baseborn, critics think it is still not very pleasant for a holy book to judge a person based on their parental roots. The issues that concern critics of Quran is not one or two. Therefore, I'll continue this subject in a series of videos. I hope you liked my analysis on the discussed issues so far. There were my honest, unbiased questions and interpretations as a born Muslim. One thing that critics have to pay attention to is that in Arabic language, it's very easy to misspell a word. For example, in the word kitab, meaning book, if we move the dots of the letter T in the middle below this letter and also omit a dot, we get the word kebab, which is a very different word. More interestingly, the primary Qurans were mainly written in Kufic script, where originally these dots didn't even exist to differentiate between letters like T and B. Therefore, it is possible that when the scribes in the early history of Islam were writing the words of Quran, they made a few mistakes. However, the big barrier to this dialogue is again that Muslims strictly believe that Quran was protected by invisible hands of God, or that the words of Quran were so carefully stored in memories of many of Muhammad's companions that the possibility of the smallest error is zero because they could correct each other if one made a mistake. Although the archaeologists who investigated this Sana manuscript found substantial textual differences. Sana manuscript is one of the oldest versions of Quran, found in 1972 in a mosque in capital of Yemen, Sana'a. Despite all these facts, English Rumi strongly advises against burning the book of Quran or any other book in public, as it won't open a window of discussion and solve any problem, and it just spreads hatred. In fact, English Rumi advises against burning any book in public. Like, should those quantum scientists who criticize some of Einstein's theories in physics go and burn his books in public? However, we have to sympathize with the frustration exploding among the ex-Muslims and critics of Islam, as most clerics and scholars of Islam react very violently against these types of concerns, and some even issue a fatwa or a verdict to behead the ones who raised their concerns and opinions. And then there are some fanatic idiots who blindly execute those verdicts. Quran is a doctrine that offers a wide range of practical solutions for human problems. We can agree with some of them and disagree with some. We cannot either burn the whole book when we disagree with some of its statements, nor can we kill someone who criticizes some statements of the book. In the end, I finished my clip with a life-teaching quote from Quran. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked it and learned something new. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos about Persian spiritual, poetry, and literature. Oh, you who have faith, avoid most of your suspicions. Indeed, some suspicions are sins. And do not spy on each other or talk behind each other's backs. Will any of you love to eat the flesh of his dead brother or friend? Of course, you would hate it. Before saying goodbye, you may want to watch this clip of mine that talks about how Muslim Rumi really was and what he thought about religious bigotry. Wish you all the best and take care till the next time.